Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome everybody to our first event in the new year. Let me wish you a happy new year. May it be peaceful, healthy, and maybe we can curb those bad trends in mobility policy this year. It's never too late to lose hope, especially not at the beginning of a new year. So this is our Interreg Europe Policy Learning e-workshop for identifying fast wins in cutting oil use in European regions. We're looking at the mobility sector, and I would like to introduce my team. So with me, we're having Simon Hankin, thematic expert for low carbon economy like myself, and Eugénie Supplisson, who is having her camera on now. Hi, Eugénie, who's our events expert, making sure that everything is running smooth in the background. Many of you know us already, and for the rest, good afternoon. Nice meeting you. A few words of housekeeping before we get started. We have designed the workshop for maximum interaction, and we've decided to go for a little bit a smaller amount of participants. We have about 70 registered, and I see you're joining slowly. Today, the principle is less is more. Less people meaning more possible interactions, and we've decided to maximize interaction with the audience through plenty of polls and also open mic sessions. So if you want to take the floor, please use the raise your hands button, and we'll try to give you space. We will also use a Miro board. Some of you are familiar with this tool. It's a board that we can pull up and look at it together. We will use it to gather content and also to allow you to post comments and good practices in an interactive break. Simon will explain that later on when it comes to that. And yeah, so overall, I hope good opportunities for interaction. Today's topic is also more for discussion with each other than simply presenting good practices. So what's the topic? The challenge is how to save fuel in the transport sector. The context is clear. We're seeing the soaring energy prices, the prices of oil at the pump. Okay, they have been going down a little bit in recent months, but they have been shockingly high. It's clear the global energy markets have been heavily disrupted in the last 1.5 years, and through a number of events, and certainly worse through the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And among the different forms of energy, is the oil market that has suffered the most severe repercussions, and it is very perturbed. So since the majority of oil demand is in transport, we've decided to focus our attention in this area, and we have not been the only ones. The International Energy Agency has also focused its attention on this area, and this is where we will have our keynote on. So overall, I see the following objectives for this event. First, to understand which measures can have a significant and rather short-term impact on saving fuel, and we will explore that with the help of our keynote. Second, to assess who are the main drivers for the different measures and how much of an impact could an individual measure have on saving fuel. Third, we want to look at impact indicators in view of their suitability to capture progress with regard to energy independence. Fourth, we will hear 5 good practices from the Interreg Europe community on successfully implemented measures. And fifth, I hope that you can take home a few useful key insights that hopefully find their way into local and regional mobility policymaking. So to reach our objectives, let's take a look at our agenda and the structure of the event that we're proposing. So we're starting with a keynote from the International Energy Agency delivered by Leonie Staes. And then we will discuss together with the panel, which is later on presenting good practices. We will discuss the keynotes and the 10 measures and see a little bit if they are within the competence of local and regional policymakers, and if so, how you see the possibilities to implement them. Then we'll have a break with an optional Miro exercise. And after that, we will dive into mobility measures from our 5 community members. We're having an example from Tartu, from Estonia, from Jaanus Tamp from the Tartu city government. We will see a number of measures towards carbon-free mobility implemented in Iași, Romania's second largest city, presented by Elena Faca. Then we will see from Madeira, from Funchal, a number of measures to increase active mobility in the city center of Funchal, presented by José Augusto Bautista Vieira. Then we will move to Sweden, to the region Kronoberg. Asa Force is going to explain us about mobility management in private companies. And then we will have a measure from the private sector implemented in several areas in Europe, presented by Brian Mason from Multimodal Transport Solutions on a virtual agency to meet mobility demands. Then we will have a discussion with our speakers and hopefully end our workshop. So without further ado, I want to move to polling the audience. And let's see a little bit from your side. Can we see the first poll, please, to give you the possibility to show us a little bit. Do you have in your territory a low carbon mobility plan or a SUMP? Yes, no, it's in development, or I don't know. Let's see a little bit how advanced on the strategic side the community is. Could we see the results, please? Okay, quite an even spread. A third doesn't know. 25% are working on it, and 30% already have one. Okay, good. And then I would like to hear from you in the time since the energy crisis. Have any additional measures been implemented in your territory that you know of that are designed to bring down the energy demand in the transport sector? Just yes, no, or I don't know. Let's see a little bit if new measures, perhaps short-term, perhaps temporary measures have been implemented. Let's see. Okay, 30% yes. Well, that is a lot. I mean, thinking about policy measures, Leonie, that gives us an idea. 30% have been active and 38% don't know. So there's also the possibility that there are some yes behind. Okay, thank you very much. Then I would like to invite Leonie from the International Energy Agency to deliver her keynote. Leonie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Katharina, and thanks for the invitation today. I'm very honored to kick off this workshop. Let me bring up the presentation. Are you seeing the slide?
Perfect.
Perfect. All right. I'm just moving my icon away so that I can see it too. Okay. Yeah, again, thanks for having me. My name is Leonie Staes. I work for the International Energy Agency, or IEA, in Paris. I work for the team producing the annual World Energy Outlook. And my specialty in the team is modeling behavior changes and their impact on the energy and environmental outlooks. And so this is a topic that gained increasing attention last year following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And the IEA has reacted in early 2022 with publishing the 10-point plan to cut oil use, together with a 10-point plan to cut gas use, and the Playing My Part initiative that we did in collaboration with the European Commission. So I'm going to present to you the measures from the oil plan, because that is most important in the transport sector that we're discussing today. So let's give a little bit of context first. As we all know, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has really thrown the global commodity markets into turmoil. And as Katarina mentioned, oil is among the most heaviest affected. Russia was, at the time of the invasion, the world's third largest oil producer and the largest oil exporter. So yeah, that explains the turmoil. And governments have been rushing to respond to the crisis in all kinds of ways. A common response measure is pricing, trying to affect the fuel price on the ground, also increasing the supply in different ways. But a third measure that is often overlooked or has been overlooked in the past is demand restraint. And the IEA has been pushing for that for many years. And we're happy to see a heightened interest in this now, because it does not only help to protect energy security, but also the climate and consumers' wallets. So this plan really aims to lay out effective measures and measures that are actionable in a short time. And all of these are dependent on individual behavior that is involved. So let's look at them in detail. I'll spend quite some time on this slide to really explain to you all these 10 measures. When we did our analysis, we assessed it on a really big scale for all advanced economies. And we found that within the 4 months following the publication, because that was the summer months, and that's the peak season for oil, that 2.7 megabells per day can be saved through these 10 measures. So that's a bit abstract probably, but we expressed the savings in barrels per day so that these are still valid today. And I'll try to give some examples that are a bit more easily to grasp on a city level. So as Katarina mentioned, the majority of oil demand is in transport. So all of these measures really treat how we get from A to B, essentially. And the first one that we're proposing is reducing speed limits on highways by 10 kilometers per hour. So this is a measure that actually in the first oil crisis in the 70s, many countries implemented, including the US and many European countries. In the EU, speed limits vary really widely on highways, but they're typically between 100 and 130 kilometers per hour. And when we look at these speeds, a 1 kilometer per hour change usually leads to around 1% of savings in fuel. So the 10 kilometer per hour change is associated to approximately 10% of fuel savings. So that's really significant. And maybe interesting to mention that this wasn't a measure that we had in this 10-point plan, but we did model for the World Energy Outlook that followed later in the same year, also what speed limits in the urban context would do. And that's a really complex because there's many different mechanisms going on when that is introduced, but we found that overall in an urban context, speed limits would lead to around 5% of fuel consumption saved. The second measure we introduced in the plan is working from home for up to 3 days a week where possible. So again, here, the impacts, of course, vary widely from region to region because the distance of commute varies, the efficiencies of the car varies. But in Europe, in general, a commute is around 15 kilometers long. And we found that around a third of all jobs can be done from home if the regulations would allow so. And keeping in mind also a seasonal element here, this is a measure that's specifically helpful in summer months because there's air conditioning involved in the car and that really drives up the fuel consumption as well. The third measure is car-free Sundays in cities. And that's again a measure that has been introduced in the past, in the last oil crisis, for example, in Switzerland or the Netherlands. And car-free Sundays are interesting because they have a lot of, they're connected to the other measures and they have spillover effects. So car-free Sundays really help to pick up walking and cycling, and therefore they have spillover effects during the rest of the week. And they bring additional benefits also to health, well-being, pollution, noise, and in warmer climates also not to underestimate the urban heat island effect that this measure really helps to reduce. So here, if we look at a city of around 100,000 inhabitants, the savings can be translated into around 2 tons of oil equivalent per year for just that city. We look at typical European consumption. The fourth measure would be introduced was making the use of public transport cheaper and incentivizing micromobility, walking and cycling. So really a mode shift. And here I'd like to give some statistics that were used in our modeling because I find it's really interesting. That around a third of fuel consumption in cities is for trips that are less than or shorter than 3 kilometers. So that's a cycle time of around 10 minutes, for example. So if that would all be made possible through cycling lanes and incentivization, that's a really huge portion of fuel use that could be shifted. Just today, actually, Le Monde published some statistics about France that I think could be quite representative for other European cities. And it showed that more than 50% of trips that are just 2 kilometers are done by the car. So this is even a shorter trip, and more than half of those are typically done by car. So it's really cultural. So these studies show that there are significant so-called reserves of modal shifting to non-polluting forms of transport. And for public transportation, we've seen some trial initiatives already, and they show that reduced fares do result in increased ridership. Of course, there's a couple of caveats here, for example, capacity. Won't get into that too much yet because I guess we'll discuss some caveats later on. The fifth measure in our plan is alternating private car access to roads. So what we mean by that is alternating access by number plates, for example, allowing even number plates on certain days and uneven on other days. And I was quite surprised to find that that's actually a measure with a long track record of successful implementation. Again, during the first oil shock, we had, for example, the Italian government doing that. And since the 80s, it's been used over and over in different cities, such as Athens, Madrid, Paris, Mexico City, usually with the goal to tackle congestion and air pollution in peak times. Next, we incentivize car sharing and the adoption of practices to reduce the fuel use. So we found in our modeling that for non-urban car trips, so longer distance trips, they are responsible for 4 million barrels of oil use in advanced economies. And currently, very few of these trips are shared. The occupancy of a car in Europe is typically 1.4 persons, so that is really potential to increase. And also when driving, cars can be used much more efficiently than that is done today through driving practices and maintenance. So to give some examples, regularly checking tire pressure can save up to 1.5% of fuel use. Eco-driving techniques, such as slow acceleration, can save up to 6% of fuel use. So really big numbers. And then, as mentioned earlier, there's also the air conditioning. That usually takes up between 4 and 10% of fuel consumption in a car. So can do a lot just to turn that down by a few degrees, or turn that up actually by a few degrees. These fuel efficient driving techniques, as a seventh measure, we also propose for commercial transport, for freight trucks and delivery in this plan. I won't get into that in too much detail because that's a lot in the private sector. We have 2 measures that are tackling the aviation sector. So that is shifting short haul plane trips to high-speed rail where possible. And where possible means that the train route available must be affordable and convenient. And so we have assessed where that is actually the case right now. And we found that around 2% of total aviation activity, so measured in kilometers per person, can be shifted right now without any additional track. So 2%, it sounds not much, but it is a lot of oil. And it also comes to show that there's a lot of need for investment in new train connections in order to really fulfill the potential here. And the other measure about the aviation sector is avoiding business travel where alternative options exist. And that is a little easier to implement right away because we've seen big learnings here from the COVID period. The majority of business trips is actually replaceable. with virtual attendance. And we've already seen a lot of major corporations come forward, such as Bain & Company, SP Global, etc. And they have announced very ambitious targets of up to 70% reduction in business trips. The last measure on our plan is reinforcing the adoption of electric cars and more efficient vehicles. So the good news is that demand for electric cars continues to be strong, but over the last years, we've seen a lot of problems in supply chains and bottlenecks. And so it is a policy priority to ensure delivery on time and that the rollout of these more efficient cars can actually continue. So to close, I would like to say a few words on what the long-term impacts of all this could be, because of course, reducing oil use must not remain a temporary measure, and the sustained reductions are really desirable, as mentioned earlier, not just for energy security, but also to tackle climate change and for health concerns. So of the measures I presented to you, around 15% of the oil savings are coming from measures that we would categorize as emergency response. So that's the car-free Sundays, for example, or the number plate policy, because these are measures that do potentially inconvenience the citizen or even pose real everyday challenges to them. However, the majority comes from measures that does reduce energy use without actually affecting the energy service. So these we call sustainable behavior changes, and they make up the majority of savings. And in our what we call net zero emissions scenario, so a scenario that is consistent with limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees, all these sustainable behavior changes are really ingrained in the scenario and play a long-term role. And you see on the graph together where you see oil, but also other fuels, that more than 10% of fuel consumption can be saved in the long term from behavior changes. And I find the shape of oil here the most interesting. It's the red one on the top, because you can see that it increases and then decreases again, the savings. That shows that in a net zero world, the overall system is decarbonizing and becoming more efficient. So cars are becoming more efficient, etc. And that means that behavior changes in the oil sector are the most important and the most efficient right now and in the short term. Yeah, and with this I close. I had some additional slides on policy and approaches, but I think that's what we're going to discuss all together going forward. So again, thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Leonie. I think really, really interesting. Yeah, I mean, what is shocking me is when I see these 10 points on your slide number 3. Yeah, and then I see that many players are just focusing on those that are linked to technology, meaning e-vehicles. Yeah, I mean, switching to electric vehicles is good for the pollution and is good if the electricity is renewable, but it can also be just displacing the problem. And if you look at the overall impact on saving oil, it's very modest, let's say. So there is so many more potential measures to look at. And I want to invite our 5 panelists to turn on their camera and to join this. Simon is going to show the report and look a little bit which ones are within the competence of local and regional policymakers. Okay, so you can see, and please feel free to adjust your Zoom window. You can move in or out so that you're seeing. We have here the 10 measures explained just now by Leonie. And I would like to invite our 5 panelists to sort these one by one into the categories within regional and municipal competence, within competence of the private sector and within national competence. So let's start with the first one, reducing speed limits on highways. Where do we sort this into? And just don't forget to switch on your microphone and yeah, just take the floor. And when you hear somebody else is speaking, let them go first, but don't be shy.
Åsa Fors, I'd like to place it in the national square.
Good.
Same here, national.
Yeah. So Simon is moving them, and if you all agree, everybody agrees, anybody sees it elsewhere?
No, it's okay.
I think it should also fit under the private sector, because in our case, most highways are handled by private companies.
Oh, okay. However, who has the authority to reduce the speed limits? Certainly not one private company who is having a concession for operating and maintaining the highway, does it?
Yes, it's also in our case, it's also a competence of the regional government, because the highways have been subgranted to the private operators, but the regional government actually sets up the rules. So I guess you can also put it as a regional competence thing.
That's interesting. Simon, can you duplicate it? Cool. Okay. Is anybody else apart from Madeira having highway speed limits within their regional competence?
Nope. No.
Okay. Maybe you are in a special situation because you're an island and you're counting as a region.
Yes, we have lots of specificities.
Good. Well, this is also why we have you as in the panel, because the islands have a specific and thank you for adding this perspective. Okay, work from home up to 3 days a week where possible. Where do we put this?
More like private from our perspective.
Private and also municipal, I guess.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yes, absolutely. I think it also fits under the private sector.
And also below the regional, if the regional are the employers.
Yeah.
I would also argue that it's on a national one, because in France, for example, there is a law that requires employers to allow a certain amount of home working under certain conditions. So I think that national governments can incentivize employers to do that or even mandate them.
Good point. Okay. Comment in the chat says in Belgium it's national and they require days for home working from home. Indeed. Thank you. Good. How about car-free Sundays in large cities or small cities?
Municipal.
In cities.
Local.
Local.
Local for clear.
Yeah.
I agree, local.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Measure number 4, I can't read it anymore. That is, yeah, make public transport cheaper and incentivize micromobility, walking and cycling.
National.
It's also municipal and national level.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, yeah. It's both.
Okay. All levels.
Yes, again, in our case, it's dubious, because it's both as a regional and municipal, in opposition to what has happening in most European cities. In our case, the municipality has decided to grant the public transport obligations to a private company. So it's also a private sector, in fact, for public transports, as well as for active mobility. It's a municipal level.
Okay. All right. Good. Alternate the private car use in large cities.
Municipal,
Municipal probably.
Should also be under the private sector, because they usually come up with the business models to reach out to the city level. We have been reached by several companies that wants to implement this kind of model schemes using this kind of actions in the municipality. So,
but the competence, I mean, maybe the impetus, but the competence to regulate access for even and uneven number plates.
oh yeah, yes.
I
Okay.
think national level is also important here. It's very, very much on regulations, national level as well.
Let's duplicate it. Okay, good. And okay, urge car sharing and practices that decrease fuel use.
national,
National, yes.
National.
Interesting. Nobody sees it at the regional and local?
No, but as private sector, we're working with companies that are promoting this among the employees.
Yes, same here.
Yeah. Maybe let's duplicate it as well. Yeah. Good.
I'd like to mention, I know of some examples, for example, in Paris, where there are lanes dedicated for shared rides, ride sharings, where, so I'm not sure who would be responsible here, but it seems that would be on a city level. It's not a regulation, but there are ways locally to incentivize ride sharing.
I have seen that too. Like for commuting into cities, even across borders. I see it in Luxembourg and on the Belgian highways. There's a special lane marked when it comes into Luxembourg for only for cars used with 3 people or more. Okay, good. And then number 7. Promote efficient use of freight trucks and goods delivery. Okay, so it's educate how to drive in a fuel efficient way.
Basically, in our case, on a private sector and the municipal and also regional.
every one of them.
Yeah, even
Yeah.
national.
Everyone, yes, because the private sector could use it as a training to their own drivers, but the public sector could offer it as a training to companies overall. Okay. And then I think now we're having avoiding business travel and taking, preferring high-speed trains and night trains where possible.
Private and public,
It's more like regional or national level.
Also private level in some.
Also private level, yeah.
And also regional.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it fits in all levels, and Also, we don't have to forget that regions and cities are big employers themselves. So even they could direct this measure towards their own stuff. So this one was switching to trains where possible instead of planes. And the next one is very closely linked to that, but it's about avoiding the business trips altogether. First, I did not see too much the difference, but number 8 is like a switch of means of transport, and
that's
number
really
9 is
mostly
like the
private
avoiding.
use. Yeah, it's us, it's every citizen. The number 8 is really not just business trips. Business trips is not the biggest share in aviation activities. So this is about each and every person making an individual choice. So it's a bit hard to say where to put that.
Yeah. Okay,
Everybody.
here, the avoiding business travel, where would you put that? Private sector?
Yeah,
Everywhere.
maybe. Yeah.
And also all the levels,
Yeah,
looking at the administrations as employers.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the picture is, what does it tell us? Okay, we still have number 10. Number 10 is the e-vehicles, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the promotion of e-vehicles and a few more efficient vehicles.
Yeah, this is also municipal and regional.
Yeah,
Everybody.
National.
Yeah, everybody, national
Yeah.
level also,
Yeah,
regulations, incentives.
everybody.
Right.
Very complex endeavor.
So, no, but I am quite impressed to see. Can you zoom out a little so that we can see the full picture, Simon? I'm quite impressed to see how many of these measures are, after all, within the regional and the local competence. When I looked at the 10 points first, I thought, oh yeah, the speed limitations are without scope, and the business travels, and that also. And I'm quite surprised to see, after our discussion, that so many are, after all, within the regional and the local scope. So that means that we and you are competent to look at all these. And I would like to invite each of you to pick one measure and comment on it, a measure that you find particularly interesting. And let's hear where you see opportunities for new introductions of such a measure, or potential barriers in your territory from your perspective. So each of you comments on one measure, please. Who wants to start?
I will.
Okay.
Yeah,
Elena.
please. Okay. I was first tempted by the public transport, walking and cycling, but my presentation is about this, so I will try to do something different. And I think it's really interesting to have these car-free Sundays in cities. We used to have, and I think we still respect this tradition to have once a year on the 22nd of September, the car-free day. So we close the streets, or at least the main streets, and everything is given to the public. It can be done also by enlarging the pedestrian areas. We are trying this initiative just in order during weekends. So during weekends and Christmas and other events, we try to have a larger, or to double or triple the pedestrian area in the city center, and we extend the area and make it pedestrian and cycling area. And well, at the beginning it was very badly received, but now people enjoy to come there because we try to organize different markets or events or things, and people really enjoy that. I think it will be at the beginning hard to have every Sunday car-free city, But I think step by step, organizing things in the area and working a lot on the changing behavior. I think this is a very nice idea, and it's feasible in the cities.
Great. I also love it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Elena. Next one.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the electric vehicles. When I started working in a municipality in 2009, the number of electrical vehicles was very residual. I mean, we had at least 10 cars at max. Now that some time has gone by, the number of electric vehicles have reached hundreds of vehicles. At least we have 400 vehicles, which is still a teardrop when compared to the parking in Madeira. But it showcases that citizens are more aware of its advantages. So we, the municipality, as well as the regional, have been addressing these trends using complementary measures, ranging from the installment of recharge points in both private areas and public areas. We have also created some green tariffs, which is basically an incentive for electric vehicles users to park freely in the parking meters or in our parking places. But it's also a challenge because, as you know, the electric vehicles does not actually is good for reclaiming the public space. It takes the same space as a regular vehicle. So it's a challenge for us in trying to come up with other type of incentives to tackle this increasingly problem. But it's an exciting thing for us, and the municipality is very eager to continue with pursuing actions to promote this kind of vehicles.
Thank you.
If I can come in on the public transport side, going back to the 70s, the last fuel crisis, what can be done is coordinating the demands. And take industrial estates, for example. If you can get all the employers to start and finish at the same time, the top public transport operators can provide dedicated bus services to take people to and from employment centres. But there's only a finite number of vehicles. If we can control the demand times for, say, education, employment and retail, you can maximise the use of the resources to make dedicated services to meet known demands. So that's coming on to the presentation I'll be doing anyway. But back in the 70s, one of the biggest savers of energy was moving the time. Instead of British summertime going backwards in October, it actually went forward. So we had double summertime. And because we had extra daylight for, say, 2 hours in the evening, the actual demands for energy between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock, which we are actually encouraging people to turn the lights off today to try and save energy, it worked tremendously. And also the football matches, instead of using floodlights, they took place in daylight hours, and the public transport operators provided football special buses to take people to the matches from all the areas. So in times of crisis like we're in just now, we have to recognise that if we go for car-free Sundays, that's great, but you can't increase the public transport on a Sunday because drivers need a day off. They can't work 7 days a week. So if you're going to go for a car-free day, from a public transport operator's point of view, it's far better to be Monday to Saturday, and you have the services in place and the resources in place to do the other things to provide an option. If you go for a Sunday, the operators tend not to be operating high frequency services on a Sunday. So the more attractive you make the offer to not need to use a car on a Sunday or any other day, the more chances people will use public transport every day. So what we need to do is work with communities to find out what works best for them, what works best for employers, what works best for the regions. And that comes back to what I'll be talking about, the need for multi-stakeholder business models because we're all part of the problem, all part of the solution.
Interesting additions here. Thank you, Brian. Asa and Janus?
Yes, I'd like to continue and discuss work from home, because we tried this during the pandemic and it worked out very well in the most cases. And lots of employers here in Sweden are still allowing the employees to work from home when possible, about 2 days a week. It has to do with the labor law. If you are to work more than 2.5 days a week from home, the employers must make sure that you have tables, screens, all the equipment at home, and you also have to check at home that everything is in place. But if it's less than 50% of the work time is at home, the employers don't have to do that.
That's an interesting point. Thank you, Asa.
Yep.
And Janus?
Yeah, I want to stick on speed limits and why not on highways especially, but in the city environment. And we had read quite many studies on that, and we see there is quite many benefits. One thing is of course pollution from oil burning, and we can reduce usage of oil and GHG emissions. But beside of that, we can also reduce dust in environment and also noise level. And there are many benefits on health. On speed limits, and of course security is also an important important topic here. And secondly, we like very much this car sharing approach. It's not very spread by now in our city, but we already have some companies providing this service, and what we see is that youngsters are very keen not to obtain a car or to own a car, but they are rather choosing this sharing option or lending a friend's car or something like that. But this is a trend what we see today, and then this especially we see importance in apartment building areas where there is a very big shortage on parking spaces and so on. And these are quite interesting and challenging measures, at least for us in Tartu in coming years.
Thank you, all of you. I think we see the possibility to up our game at many levels, and there are plenty of measures, and not every measure works for everybody and in every context, but there is still scope for introducing new ones. And I would like to launch a poll to the audience so that they can also say which measures are most appealing in your context. And so tell us what you think, which of these measures would be most appealing for your context? Speed limits within cities, car-free Sundays in cities, make use of the public transport cheaper, incentivize walking and cycling, and it's multiple choice, or alternate private car access to roads. And while you're answering, I would like to flag up one comment from the chat. Christine Kleve is saying that we have one level missing, the individual level, as the individual, the people, can change a lot. Of course, you're totally right. All right, so let's see which of the measures. Aha. Okay, nobody is interested in alternating the car use according to uneven or even number plates. Biggest interest in speed limits within cities, followed by incentivizing walking and cycling. cheaper public transport, 53%, car-free Sundays in cities, 40%. Okay, all measures quite popular. And let's see for the measures that are mostly private sector measures. Next poll. So looking at these measures that are mostly private sector measures, but thinking at what public policy could do, which of these do you think public policy could influence best? Like the working from home 1 to 3 days per week, the car sharing, the efficient driving style for trucks and vans, the switch to trains instead of planes, or perhaps the adoption of e-vehicles and more efficient vehicles. Think about what public policy can influence best, and multiple choice again. Let's see. And the winner is clear here. Work from home 1 to 3 days a week. Oh, it's interesting. I would have thought that is less within the public competence, but okay, this is a clear sign. This is interesting. And also the switch from planes to trains. It is true that France has, I think, made a law that is prohibiting planes for any journey that can be done within 3 hours by train or something like that. Promote the efficient driving and increase car sharing, both at 46%. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and it's time for a little break. I leave it to Simon to introduce our optional activity for the break. If you want to take a break, you can just take a break and come back at 3:10. But if you want to interact and play a little bit with us, Simon explains you just what to do.
Okay, yep. So, well, in this interactive break, we'd like to invite all of you to also let us know about your practices. So in our first poll, we saw that 31% of our participants are coming from regions or cities that have implemented new measures in response to the energy crisis. So this is your chance to tell us about those. But of course, if you have existing practices, not specifically new ones, which are interesting, also, we're happy to hear this. So it's quite simple. You should have the link in the chat. I hope Eugenie has shared it again. Yes, there it is. So very simply, drag a post-it into the relevant column that closely matches your practice, and just put in there your name and a short description of the practice. And this will allow us to crowdsource practices from around Europe, which we may be able to use in future events or write-ups. So that would be it.
And we will look at what you have posted there in our final session. So don't be shy. And Eugenie and Simon are there to help you if you don't manage, but normally just click on the link and it should take you straight into the Miro board, and just try playing around with it. It's very easy. And I say goodbye until 3:10. Okay, welcome back. I see some of you have been daring and trying to post some post-its. I hope it was not too difficult. I think once you get a hang of it, you understand how to do it. I would like to open now the second session. We're hearing mobility pitches from our 5 panelists. And so we've invited these as examples of local and regional measures with potential to reduce oil use in transport. And we're going to hear 5 examples. Let's start with Tartu, and please make your pitches 5 minutes. The floor is yours. Janos, you go first. You have to unmute
Hello,
yourself.
yeah, sorry. So I'm here. Thank you very much. I want to speak shortly on biking. Why? Because last years we have put a lot of energy and efforts to enhance our public transport system, and now we have almost 100% carbon-free public transport system in Tartu. But our next challenge is biking, and Tartu is very compact city by distances, and biking is the most, in our opinion, most feasible way to move around the city, and not only regular biking but also cargo biking. And why? Because this is a very new thing in Estonia, in Tartu, and unfortunately I can't change my slides. Sorry. And
try the arrows.
Yeah, I tried. No, it works. So in 2021, it's a little bit more than a year ago, we started new implementation in Tartu. We implemented a cargo bike lending system named Velorent. Initially, we had only 3 cargo bikes, but thanks to popularity, we raised this number by the end of 21 to 17 cargo bikes. Most of these cargo bikes are electrical ones, and now we are in operation more than 1 year, and we are very happy because in last year we got already 152 sessions. And why cargo bikes? Because we see, especially in city center areas, that in the morning rush hours there is quite big gathering of different ones, and also near to pedestrian areas, and it's very much on safety, and also we see that such usage of funds is not cargo funds is not feasible, and then we are looking for alternatives, and we hope very much that cargo bikes will be this alternative. The system is operated by our own subunit. This is Linnatransport, who is also responsible for our public transport and our bike sharing system. And just to keep the system attractive, we also created automated landing and maintenance point in the city center to connect it to our new booking system, which was also created for this landing, and this landing point have smart locks. It means that if you are booking a cargo bike in certain time, you can have access to this bike using PIN code sent by the booking system. And same when you will return your bike. And of course, we wanted to raise awareness among citizens and our companies, and created also supportive documents about cargo bikes for private users, for companies, and also for in national level recommendations how to improve the usage of cargo bikes. And just some hints about how we have proceed. We are very happy because we have also feedback form circulated among users, and what we see is that most of users are using these cargo bikes to replace a car. And this is very good. Mostly people are using cargo bikes to transport children, small children, young children, and then in some extent also for building materials and like this, things like this. And we know that already at least 1-2 our former users have obtained their own cargo bike. So I think we have been successful, and of course we made a lot of media work to introduce cargo bikes and our lending system, and especially in first year, and issued very many articles and news and also media work. And just for finally, what I want to say is I'm quite confident to say that thanks to our Velarent lending system, the support for obtaining electrical cargo bikes was also considered in the new support measure, which will be launched very soon by state to support the electrical vehicles. So I'm very happy about this, and hopefully we can see soon a lot of cargo bikes in Estonian roads. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, cargo bikes do have the. Hello, can you hear me?
Hello. Yeah. Okay.
Cargo bikes do have the ability to replace car journeys. Yeah, I don't know. I don't see. Okay. Audio issues. I said cargo bikes have the potential to replace cars, and maybe that's a feedback to Leonie. Connection's unstable.
Yeah.
Okay. Simon, you.
Simon, maybe
KPIs?
you can take over while Katarina is checking her internet connection.
Yep, so I'm not sure what the feedback the question was. Katarina, maybe if you just turn off your camera, that will help with the stability.
I would like to know which KPIs.
Yeah, I heard that Katarina wants to know what KPIs we are using. Basically, what we are using as a basic KPI is a modal split, and at least the 4 categories. It's vehicles, public transport users, cyclists, and pedestrians. And I think we are quite confident that this work is reflected in the number of vehicles on street. We can monitor vehicles by districts, and especially we are looking on the city center area. And recently we also built quite good tool in real-time monitoring of modal split in the city. and in the different areas, and that this is the main tool and then the main KPI what we are using.
Okay, thank you, Janis. I think Katarina is still having some problems. So, well, I'd like to launch now the first poll, because basically what we'd like to find out now from the participants would be how easy you think the practice would be to implement in your own region, and also how speedy you think it would be. So yeah, we're looking at the two sort of criteria here. So ease of implementation and speed of implementation. So yeah, please answer this poll and then we'll map this out on the Miro board afterwards. Okay. We can end that now and show the results, or maybe one more second. Okay, perfect. So, okay, I mean, we're seeing here feedback that it is quite a, well, deemed quite an easy practice to implement, of medium sort of length to implement. So, yep, we'll map that out and come back to that at the end of the session. Katarina, I don't know if you're back now, but if not, we'll go on to our next presenter. Thank you very much, Janis. So we'll now go on to Elena Farka from Iași municipality, who will be presenting on towards carbon-free mobility in Iași. Elena, please, over to you.
I am. You can hear me.
No, Katarina, it's still very robotic.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I'm coming from Romania, from the eastern city of Romania, and we have been committed to this change of our mobility starting to the years 20,000, but we made the main steps, as you will see, after 2015. And it was a long-term process, and we tried to solve the traffic congestion, the air pollution, and also we had a very low use of public transport. As I mentioned, we started with the adoption of Iași SAMP after 2 years of public consultation in all kind of public. We tried to reach all categories of public in the city. It's a university city, so a very strong NGO activity. So we tried to address all the categories, and so we have this SAMP adopted around 2017. And in the meantime, we started the implementation of the traffic management system. And now we really completed the implementation, and we have more than 96 crossroads implemented and all the main streets monitored. And last year we have more than 10,000 interventions solved. That means traffic congestion solving or incidents or things like that. We also started in 2016 to have the first 11 kilometers of biking lanes, and we created the first major pedestrian area in the historical part of the city. And nowadays we planned to implement this year the Iași Velocity project with 900 bikes, electric and classical bikes, on dedicated line. And we intend also to double the pedestrian area. Also in 2018-2019, we started the public transport modernization with acquisition of 100 new buses, Euro 6. The entire fleet of very obsolete and polluting buses have been replaced. And then we continue this process with dedicated lanes for public transport, with organizing the Green Fridays. That means that each Friday the public can use the public transport for free. And also we included in our digital transformation strategy for the city, the strategy for carbon-free mobility. So in 2022, in the frame of this strategy, we completed the acquisition of 36 new tramways and 44 electric buses, 12 meters long or 10 meters long, with European funds. And in 2023, this month even, we signed a new contract for 18 more new trams and 25 new electric buses in the Romanian plan for resilience. Also in 2022, Iași had its Green City Action Plan financed by EBRD. And on this plan, we also included a public building renovation, near zero buildings, and also very highly efficient from the energetic point of view, but also the construction of the new depot for the trams and electric buses. And I included also some images. This new depot will have more than 55,000 square meters and will cost about 46.5 million euros. And it will be completely independent from the electric point of view, from the energetic point of view, based on photovoltaic system and heat pumps. Also, it will produce energy on solar panels, which allows an installed power of 1,400 kilowatt per hour, and also will produce around 500 megawatt per year. So the energy produced will be used for the functioning of the depot, but also will be included in the electric system for functioning the tramways and the electric buses, for the charging stations and for the network for the tramways. Like evidence of success and the famous KPIs, we have higher air quality measurements during last year, because we also implemented the system of sensors in the entire city for measuring the CO2 emission and dust emission. We also have a higher use of public transport, and we have an increase with more than 10% the number of users and incomes from ticketing. In the last 5 years, we have in the new tramways and buses, we have this system of counting the passengers, and also we have a monitoring of ticketing. And also we have an impact on investments and in service quality and energy efficiency, which are also measured in our public transportation. Well, this is the presentation. Thank you, and I'm looking forward for the questions.
Thank you, Elena. I will try again. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we do.
Super. Okay. Yeah, your measures are very comprehensive, and congratulations. This is a very coherent and holistic approach, and the energy independent depot is also great. I think not so easy to implement your measure. Let's launch the 2 polls and see what the audience is thinking, but a very high impact, I guess. So how long did it take you to implement this? Maybe to anticipate the answer here.
Well, it was about 7 years if we think that we started with our SAMP in around 2017. So yeah, it was a long process. It was not easy, and it was long, but I think it was quite comprehensive.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, this is not something that you do overnight. You have already shown us your impact indicators. Are there any others that are relating to saving fuel that you have used?
I think there is also measurements on consumption reduction of fuel in our public transport company, but those data were not available when I asked for this. But I'm sure that they do keep count of this, and they based the study for the depot on this economies, on this savings on fuel, and also on electricity cost, because this is now like everywhere in Europe very high, and the new depot will have a huge impact on the savings for the entire company.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Elena. Great example from Yash. Rather difficult to implement and rather long as expected. Thank you very much for sharing with us. Let's move to Madeira, and let's hear about the measures to improve walking and cycling in the city center. Slides are coming. Jose, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Katerina. So I'm going to address a soft measure that we have been implementing in some streets in the city center of Funchal. I'm sure most of you are pretty much acquainted with shared spaces, which basically aims to reclaim street space for active modes in order to boost walkability. Next slide, please. So some central streets in Funchal, before being converted to shared spaces, we had several constraints in terms of mobility and accessibility. As you can see in these pictures, there was a disarticulation of road space in which streets were primarily allocated for motorized vehicles, impairments for pedestrians with narrow sidewalks, and the vehicle traffic volumes that were not really compatible with the land use that is common in central areas. So in order to tackle these issues and to ensure a better management of public space and a mixed use between cars and pedestrians, in 2019, the Portuguese Road Code embedded shared spaces in which our cities were finally able to implement these areas. As for national rules, the main highlight concerns pedestrians that within shared spaces can use the entire road lane without restrictions. Although vehicles can still circulate in these areas, the speed limit in these zones is limited to 20 kilometers per hour. So if we move to the next slide, I can show you some of the benefits in creating these shared spaces. I guess we can highlight for axes, better mobility conditions for pedestrians, because since we have speed restrictions, we will have lesser traffic volumes. In terms of sustainability, shared spaces, they can work as a low speed zone. They can lead to a reduction of noise and hence a reduction in greenhouse emissions. In terms of urban renewal, there is an increase of attractiveness leading to a boost of local economy through the creation of more pedestrian-oriented streets. And finally, the social component, in which shared spaces can incorporate traffic calming measures and vehicle use restrictions. They can lead to an increase of social, recreational and economic activities in these areas. So going through the creation process, shared spaces are practically costless, but they do require preliminary assessment and an ongoing monitoring campaign, as well as an active awareness campaign. So in Funchal, and prior to the implementation, we basically did a territorial assessment in which we launched a survey to perceive receptiveness. During this stage, we also raised awareness among local traders to explain the concept behind shared space. As for the implementation, it's basically 2 traffic signs that were deployed that specially identify the boundaries of shared spaces. And as for monitoring, and as the majority of actions related to mobility, We collected data to assess the impact that ranged from traffic countings to surveys and among others. So what about its impact? The table presented here is a qualitative approach that ranks each of the specific objective. As for traffic reduction, we've managed to reduce the number of vehicles in these areas, since most drivers are not really keen in driving in shared spaces due to the restrictions. The same goes for road safety, but actually this was a difficult goal to achieve because at the earliest stages, pedestrians don't really felt encouraged to walk in the same lane where cars are circulating. But as for environmental protection, lesser traffic congestion, as you all know, means less noise and means less greenhouse emissions. As for the community livability, giving back these spaces for people and not cars was beneficial in the sense that it can improve social and leisure activities. And finally, there is an improvement of local economy that reflects in more revenues, which is always positive. So basically, this is our experience with shared spaces. Upon reflection, it's not a perfect solution, far from it, and it requires a good communication approach. You have to ensure a tremendous commitment for enforcement authorities, especially during the early stages, to ensure that drivers are able to comply with these rules. And the fact that there is a lack of urban design interventions, there isn't actually a change in the street landscape, may not be really appealing. But on the other hand, the implementation is fairly simple and extremely cheap. It's also a great test to assess the impact upon traffic. And if citizens does not complain, it can lead to an upgrade, namely closing down permanently the street to cars and incorporate design features to make it more appealing. So I remember reading an author that once said that shared spaces is the first step to closing down the streets. So thank you. Looking forward to questions.
Thank you very much for sharing this nice, good practice from Funchal. I'm particularly pleased to see that you have highly rated the economic indicator, yeah, where you say that it's good for the traders after all, and it increases the attractiveness of the city center, because very often policymakers are afraid because some traders shout very loud and there are strong voices against such, let's say, any limitation to the kingdom of cars. And that's great. So you, yes?
No, that's why it's very important to gather data, because if you, for instance, in our case, we did a post-implementation survey in which we gathered information from local traders, and they were aware there was some raises in their revenue. So we can actually use that information to replicate this action to other streets and present this information to local traders. We can also use it for politicians. So it's very good to evaluate properly the impact of these measures.
That's great, and this is exactly it. Once you have one example, you can measure and you can use it to convince. It's the first one that really costs. Good. You have already elaborated the impact indicators very good. So Simon is capturing these for our discussion afterwards. Let's look at the poll. You said rather easy and rather cheap to implement. What does the audience say? And to Elena, to Leonie, maybe this is again another measure that is not really captured in your 10 points, just as what I was trying to say when my audio was bad for the cargo bikes, because I didn't know where the cargo bike would fit under your 10 points. But this is really replacing car use, so I think it's a good measure as well. Let's see, rather easy, 58% think it's rather easy, or medium, nobody thinks it's rather difficult. and the impact, time to impact between speedy and middle. So I would say a winner for local policymakers, this measure. Thanks for sharing. We will move on to looking at private companies and how their mobility behavior can be influenced with the help of a regional policy. Asa, share with us the experience of the region Kronoberg, please.
Thank you. Okay, we have been doing this project for 2 years, and the goal is to reduce the CO2 emissions and support the national and regional strategy. It's all about changing the behavior of people. And we have a special method for doing this. It's about working with the private companies, and we have been working with about 20 private companies in the whole region. And we have a mobility plan management in 4 steps. So we always start to make a measure at the company to see what is the status today, how do people commute, how do they travel back and forth to work and also in business. So we investigate this. And the next step is about inventory. And I will come back to that. We create a transport plan, and we also tailor it to the specific company because they all have different needs. The next step is act. We carry out the activities in the plan. We do it together with the company. So we have a shared responsibility in doing this. And the last step is about measure the results, to follow up and see how did we do? Have we managed to make any change? What are the benefits? And I will dive into this mobility management plans. We use this as a tool when we work with the company, and you're not supposed to be able to read all this text. It's just to show that this is the broad picture. It's like a checklist that we go through with the company. It has different areas like bikes, bus and trains, car, coordination, control and information, and also comprehensive and fundamental work around sustainable travel. So we go through with the company, what do they have in place today and what is possible for them to implement. Do they have a travel policy for business travel, for example? And how well is it done? Can you improve it? When we work with bikes, we check, do they have bike facilities? Where are the bike parking situated? Is it close to the entrance or in the far distance behind the car parking, or how does it look? We also check for the bus and trains. What are the possibilities to commute with bus and trains? Can the company help in any way, like paying some fees maybe to help the staff? We also have contact with the public transport sector. So we discuss with them like time, what time the buses run. Is there any changes we can do to match the working hours? And finally, we work with the car. What kind of car parking do they have? Do they allow loading electrical vehicles? How do they nudge fossil-free vehicles? Do they use car or ride sharing in any way? And how can they enhance that? So there are several things that we go through. And then the company make a they have to prioritize what they want to implement of all these things that we've gone through. And the last step, we also have these test activities as part of the plan. So the employees can try and they do it for free. They can try the public transport for 1 month for free, where they can use an electric bike for 6 weeks and try to go back and forth to work. We also have fossil-free vehicles that they can use. And we always have a selection. So if you live very close to work, you cannot use a car, of course, then you can use a bike instead. So we try to tailor it to the company. And during this project, we also have exercise competitions and campaigns at the companies. We have free bike services and repair, all we can to nudge the different behaviors. And results from this is that we have seen we have a lower CO2 emission per kilometers and person. So that's our KPI. We started this last year during the pandemics. And when we follow up this year, 2022, it was a bit tricky to distinguish between the pandemic effects, of course, and the effects from the project. Because during the pandemic, you weren't allowed to use the bus or car sharing, ride sharing in the same level as you can now. Well, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Asa. This is so precious that you focus on commuting. And I know at least one of our participants, Giovanni Vargiu, who is going to be very happy that you focus on the commuters. Right, Giovanni? You are having a special attention to the commuting in and out of the city of Cagliari, I think, in Sardinia. Yeah. Okay, Asa, you as a region, you work with the company, with one company representative, and then they work with the individual employees, or do you work directly with all the employees?
We both, we work in 2 ways of contacts, both with the contact person, but we also meet the employees. We are at the company. We have different activities on the parking lots, for example, where we meet the employees. So we try to be there as much as we can to be visible.
There are very few practices across Europe that focus on changing the commuting behavior. I would like to see many more. Congratulations for this great one. I think it's excellent. And also, I would like to remind everybody that every organization can be considered as a company. I mean, everybody has stuff, the public sector as well. We can all look at ourselves and do that for our employees and for ourselves. So it just takes somebody to initiate. Of course, it's always the public hand who has to initiate, and somebody has to wear the head to drive the things. And that's why public policy is there. But we can also be responsible individually. You have already shared your KPIs. Let's look at the ease of implementation and the speed in our typical polls. Okay. How many resources in terms of human resources has it cost you, and over how much time did you do that, Asa?
During 2 years, and we've been about 4 full-time. Yeah. People.
Okay, rather easy up to medium. 100% find it middle to easy, and 90% find it doable either in 6 months or at least up to 18 months. So that's, I would say, perhaps another low-hanging fruit to harvest. Okay, thank you very much for sharing this. And we stay with private initiatives. And I call Brian to the floor. Please present your virtual agency.
Thank you. Well, the whole concept behind the virtual agency goes back 23 years, believe it or not, when we started to get access to GPS. We could now to start designing telematics where we could identify the vehicles. And as a transport planner for 25 years, the biggest thing when we're developing services is understanding the needs of the customer. So way back, the first European project I was involved in was FARMS, which we looked at creating a virtual agency. So on the left-hand side, you have the total supply chain of people. From the day you're born to the day you die, you're a consumer. Your needs change constantly, and we need to identify those needs as they change in every city, every town, every rural area. On the right-hand side, you have the total supply chain from the operators. So that could be taxi, bus, train, plane, automobile, the haulage side. This can be adopted for people, goods, or anything. And in the middle, you need technology to actually understand the demands of the people and understand the market that's there to meet those demands. Sounds so simple that you can actually identify the demands of everybody and the supply chain. And we thought we were going to be the next Bill Gates in the middle and take 10% off everybody and the world would be perfect. 23 years later, still not happened in its entirety. But to make this happen, we need to identify, as every single presentation is done today, the complexity of how we regulate, how we innovate, how we train, how we inform the people, and how we get people to change their mentality. So the whole concept we came up with the flexible agency needs data. And behind this, we have the problems associated with GDPR. Data protection is there. Everybody complains about how bad the train services, the bus services, the tram services, but nobody wants to share their data. But when you do, and we've successfully done this, the savings are tremendous. We can get 30% savings in vehicles, 30% saving in costs, 20% growth in passengers. Everybody's happy. It's a win-win. However, we all have to realize that to do this, we all have to work together. No one organization can make things happen on its own. So we've got to build confidence for the authorities, investors, the communities, the suppliers, to show a panacea of what we are trying to create, which is a better world for everybody and every individual. The concept is so good, you think it would be, everybody would want to do it, but nobody likes change. And this is the biggest problem we face in society. However, COVID and the energy crisis has been the biggest stimulus for this to take off. In 2019, this business model was highlighted at the G20 summit in Tokyo for actually influencing climate change and the reduction in CO2 and fossil fuel use. It's taken a long time, but now we have a crisis. We are seeing great changes in thinking, and now companies willing to work together. So currently, I'm involved in 2 European projects with Aveiro University, with Primas and SysMob, where we're actually using lean and co-design and co-creation, involving everybody. So everybody can understand the problems that everybody else perceives and does face. And where we can actually get people to actually realize that the design of cities, the services that we do, every city is unique, like every person is unique. And we have to understand how we can build a better cities and what is best. Some cities will be more prone to cycling, some cities will be more trams. And it comes back to data. Data is the key to win the political argument, the social argument, and the business argument. And multimodal networks are the future. Bus is never going to solve the solution. Your journey starts at home and finishes at home or finishes at the end destination. You will need a piece of cycling, walking, trains, planes, and automobiles. Everything is part of the problem, and everything has got to be part of the solution. The European Union recognised this, the poor return on investment in IT for ITS investment, and we looked at how we could use the same business models working across 4 different modes, and the return on investment we got was between 2.5 and 13 times. Now, if you can come up with a business model that can make 1.5 times and go to the bank, they'll bite your hand off. When you have 13 times return on investment, people think, why is this not happening? Because people don't like change. Nobody likes change. However, when we're all part of the change and it works, society becomes a better place, the world becomes a better place. And we are now, because of this crisis, at an opportune moment to actually make the world a better place by working together. It's easy to say, it's difficult to happen, but we have delivered 30% saving. We now have a company that 5 years ago was 20 people, is now a unicorn company employing almost 1,000 people with 2,000 sites across the world and over 300 in Europe, where they realise that they cannot provide all the solutions, but by working together with the stakeholders and other companies, they can build better communities, better public transport by understanding what type of technologies they need to develop to make the world a better place. So multi-stakeholder business models by every form of humanity has to be the way forward. That we all have to give a little to gain a lot, sharing the risk, sharing the cost, and sharing the rewards. And there's an example of Optibus, their client base in Europe at the moment, that I know every country. I'm not here to plug any company, but this would not have happened unless COVID and the energy crisis. It takes a crisis to give a quantum leap, and people have to think, we need to do something. We need to save the planet. And the KPIs, I've just added them on just now, reduction in kilometres, reduction in vehicles used, reduction in fossil fuel consumption, CO2, increase in passengers carried, goods carried, reduction in accidents, micromobility, increased usership, ownership, trips, reductions in health. This is the other thing. We all go on about how sick the world is in individuals. If we get people to switch to more sustainable mobility, like cycling, walking, and micromobility, you become healthier. And also, being from Sweden, I used to live in Malmö. So I 5 years, I was an older guy, never been on a bike. And once you move to Sweden and you can see the benefits, they're fitter, healthier, the Danes, the Dutch, the Germans. It's not by accident. It's because their cities are designed by the people, for the people, cleaner air, and you can see the health benefits. And we need to do something to make the world a better place. And we have the technology, we have the business model, but have we got the will to change? That is the question.
Thank you, Brian. I think this is complex. It's difficult to implement, but harvesting 30% of efficiencies just by creating a system of all the existing mobility supplies, integrating them through technology and creating a new business model for meeting the individual mobility demand is, I mean, this sounds like a miracle.
Yeah, but it's now called mass.
Yeah.
It's now basically, people would call this mass. We were working on this 10 years before mass was even thought about. And it's taken, for every problem in the world, there is a solution that creates a different kind of problem. And we need to, for every solution that comes up, you will face GDPR problems, legislative problems, because nobody could take account of the legislation, of the innovation when they were building the legislation legislation. So you have a lag of maybe 20 years behind innovating something to be accepted through the political process, the legislative process. But now we're needing to do things quickly. We have demonstrated we have the technology and the business models. Can we all work together to break down the barriers to make this happen quickly?
Okay. You've made your point, exceeding your 5 minutes.
Sorry, yeah.
But thank you. It was worth a while, Brian. And thanks for elaborating on the KPIs. Of course, I would like to hear if you are not just listing them, but if they are also being monitored and reported on. But I think the answer is at best partially, because this will be quite difficult. And I don't want to have another 5-minute answer. So let's move to our polls on the complexity and the speediness of implementation. Well, I think you already mentioned it.
Yeah.
And so we can move this very quickly. I expect everybody to find this rather difficult and rather lengthy to implement, which doesn't mean that it should not be done, because the impact is clearly very, very high.
If I can just come in with one quick comment, you don't have to implement the whole lot. The multi-stakeholder business model will help any of the initiatives that will be highlighted today progress quicker.
Yes, there I agree, definitely. Okay, some find it rather easy. I am curious to be contradicted on this one. Who finds it easy, and who wants to take the floor and explain why you find it easy? Nobody wants to say. Okay, good. Fair enough. Thank you very much. Thank you for this very complimentary and insightful presentations from your different cities and regions, and for sharing the KPIs, which brings us now to our last session, where we want to do 3 things. First, we want to look at the mirror boards and look a little bit at how you classify the measures on their ease of implementation and the speediness of implementation. Then we want to discuss KPIs, and then we want to look at what other practices you have proposed during the break. So this is what will fill the last round of our workshop. Simon, let's share the boards.
Okay, hopefully you can see that. I'm just trying to zoom in to make that a little bit bigger. Okay, well, here you'll see a rough estimation of the results of the 2 polls for each practice. So not perfectly scientifically measured out, but roughly where it was falling. So well, we had 2 which were clearly sort of regarded as slower to implement and harder to implement. So that's no reflection on impact, but perhaps not the quick wins that we're looking to identify today. Again, very good practices themselves. So these were the setup in Yashi, and also the virtual agency to meet mobility demands. We then had 3 practices, mostly related to active transport and shared transport, which were regarded as quick to implement and easy to implement. So the Tartu bike and cargo bike sharing, the shared spaces in Funchal, and mobility management in private companies. So 3 very different practices, but all regarded as quick wins. I don't know if you have more.
Yes.
Reflection, Katarina?
Yeah. Yep. I think it's good to look at it in this way. It helps if anybody is interested in any of these measures to better grasp them. And I would like to ask the audience, here is your chance. Please use the chat to give us a sign if you are interested in any of these 5 good practices. We can arrange a matchmaking and a direct meeting with the authors who have presented them and you can learn more about this. So give us an indication in the chat if you want us to contact you on any of these, and indicate which one you're particularly interested in, and we will get back to you after the event. Okay, and yeah, I mean, you see the titles even if we move to another section of the Miro board. You can mention them if you don't say exactly the right word. You just indicate from which city. Okay, right. Let's look at the KPIs next.
Okay, I did my best to record all of these, but I may have not got all of the new ones. For Brian, I took a screenshot also of his list in the end. So here we go.
Okay, so we wanted to group the KPIs into areas, which is a little bit difficult because now they're grouped by good practice. But okay, it doesn't matter. What I would like to invite our panel, including Leonie, to do is to look at these KPIs and take a step back and consider again our introductory priorities to save fuel in the mobility sector, to reach better energy independence from, let's say, imported fuel. So just be critical and be a little bit open, and let's hear if you think that these KPIs are adequate, or what is missing for future mobility making. Should there be KPIs that are more specifically measure the reduction in fuel per measure, because that's not something that we can directly see. And yeah, so the floor is yours. I want to encourage a little bit a discussion on that.
Katarina also here. I just want to correct the thing. It's supposed to be reduced emissions per person and kilometer. Yeah.
Or correct things, please. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Jaanus from Tartu. I think this in KPI reduced emissions per person and kilometer is in my opinion, the most important one, because this is reflecting very clearly the situation, and our aim is in general to reduce emissions, not so much fuel, maybe, but mostly emissions, and in that sense, I think also is good KPI reduced the emissions per person as well. I think it will also reflect quite well, but per kilometer it's a better one. It's my opinion.
Maybe some reactions from my side. Of course, personally, reduced emissions per person per kilometer I find the most interesting as well.
Leonie, can you be closer to the mic?
Yes, sure. You hear me better?
Great, thanks.
Yes, I was just saying that this indicator, reduced emissions per person per kilometer, is of course really important. But I mean, I find the question hard to answer because it depends on what we're really aiming to track. If it's about fuel, this one is difficult because there are other factors that might get lost, like the efficiency of the vehicle that's being used. If you're tracking over longer periods of time, it's important to also collect data about how does the same fuel, or like an electric bike, for example, how do the batteries technology evolves over time, become more efficient? So this all gets a bit lost in per kilometer. But at the same time, it's important if you want to advertise also the environmental impact. And there are other factors like air quality mentioned here, or health indicators that I think, of course, again, when we focus on fuel consumption, are hard to bring in, but I think are very important to track if it's measures that are quite innovative, that are maybe being implemented kind of as first movers, where it's very important to make these more widely publicly accepted. And we've heard this many times now that the data collection, especially in the beginning, is so important so that these measures can experience a bigger rollout. And so for that purpose, I think things like air quality, CO2 is really important. But for example, from an IEA perspective, what we really need is kilometers driven by specific vehicle type. Then it can be translated into emissions factors and fuel use.
That's interesting. Is any of you tracking kilometer driven by vehicle type? Because I could not relate the impacts that Leonie was presenting in her presentation with the impacts that we measure, that you measure in your good practices typically. I mean, at least not easily.
All transport companies actually measure the performance of each type of vehicle that they've got. And you can assess the type of fuel, type of vehicle, type of engine, and you can work out which is the most efficient. But that then comes back to getting all the operators to work together, because a certain vehicle might work better in the Netherlands because it's flat, but you actually put it into an area that's hilly, it's not as efficient. So it's actually, we need data. We need to, in many ways, we have all the technology to gather the data, but we're just not allowed to do it because GDPR is not helping. So this is something that we don't have this problem in America, by the way. They can measure anything and everything, but in Europe, because we don't like anybody having their data. And from my time in Sweden, when you look at bike thefts and the likes, because they don't have CCTV, we all have to give up a little sometimes to protect what we want. And we all have to give something to get something. And unless we can get the data, we won't make as big breakthroughs as we can with the technology that we've got.
You're right, Brian. I like to pick up on what you said. I think, Leonie, you said some indicators should be measured to better convince the public. Maybe we can discuss which indicators are useful for what type of purpose. I mean, to defend sustainable mobility measures and their introduction, we must bring the general public on board. We need to bring the business community on board. Which ones do we see that are useful to convince the general public? I think perhaps the ones that relate to health and air quality and safety. Would you agree?
I would agree with that, but also, again, directly the kilometers, because that can very easily be translated into monetary savings. And we really saw that last year, that's what convinces the people most. How much can they save on their fuel use?
I would add also service quality of public transportation, because high or very good quality of public transportation means low emission in a hand and more users in another hand. So both things are important, I think.
What we don't measure, which we should, is the customer happy. I mean, it seems crazy, but we do all this, but we don't. If we can assess, are people happy now? Probably not. When we do things, are they any happier after they're finished? And if we could put a smile, we've got to somehow inject some hope that things are going to get better. And if we could have sort of smile factor that we're at 2 just now, but we're trying to get to 10 through various actions.
You think did you find the visit to this toilet pleasant? Yes, big smile.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, we need to get the people to be part of this process.
Mm-hmm.
All these technical stuff, yeah, it's important, But is it really going to hook the fish to make people change? Is that the bait that we need to produce all this? Are people happier? How can we make it happier? And do people want their cities to be better? Yes. Do they want to be cleaner? Yes. Who's causing all the problems? We are. So we're part of the problem.
Yeah.
So it's how you sell it to the people to change.
Okay. Yes. So we collect what you said. It will appear in our summary. So about from the indicators to convince the people, that's fine. But interesting again is here the kilometers saved associated to the costs saved. And before there was a comment in the chat, which was questioning the efficiency of electric vehicles as the cost of electricity is soaring and it's even higher now than the cost for fuel. So both are expensive, but let's say the better environmental variant has even become more expensive.
I would doubt that,
you-
to be honest. I mean, our data is not showing that. And
Your data is not showing that.
Yeah, and I mean, yes, electricity is now very expensive too, but I would doubt that it is not cheaper to have an electric vehicle overall because of the efficiency of the vehicle per mileage, and also all the public support schemes for these vehicles, the fewer parking fees.
Yes. But let's say what people mostly look at is the marginal cost of driving one additional kilometer and not the system. Of course, I agree it should be cheaper as a system to operate. Can we go back to your measures, and do you see the possibility to introduce new indicators that capture the reduction of kilometers by car traveled and substituted into your good practices? And would it make sense for you?
There's good examples from Bologna where they had the bike scheme there, where if you change from car, you earn points to spend and get incentives to shop locally in the centre of Bologna. So you can use KPIs that can be measured to benefit the people, to benefit communities and the likes. But that comes back to data sharing between different people and getting the trust, because people will change if they see something in it for them other than just saving money or saving the planet. It's what's in it for me. Is sadly the way the world is these days. If people can see, oh, I'm getting a free ice cream if I actually cycle to work this week.
Yes, but you are now think as a policymaker, if you want to capture the impact of the measures that you are promoting and that you are introducing, and that you want to see really the reduction in the fuel use and the reduction in the car kilometer traveled, is there a possibility to improve the KPIs in your individual cases in the 5 ones that you've presented? Too difficult of a question.
Yeah, maybe in our case, because I spoke about the dedicated line for buses or for public transport in general, we can somehow quantify this because well, it's shortening the time and it's reducing the impact on the environment, and well, I think this is appealing for people because they are doing let's say a shorter trip using public transportation and also having a good impact on the environment. But yeah, attracting them with the arriving more quickly to the final destination than by using the car because we have all these lines for public transportation in the area with the traffic congestion. So I think, yeah, this can be included in some way in the KPIs.
Yeah, reduction in car parking spaces, reduction in car parking use, or doing something to disincentivize disincentivize the use of car parking in city centres.
Yeah, that again can be measured. Yeah, also, I mean, sorry to insist on the KPIs, but I wanted to show how difficult it is to link the theoretical work of energy reduction modeling and demand reduction modeling with the realities of measures in the regions that reduce demand and that shift demand and that nudge and influence behavior. So I don't know, Leonie, maybe you can summarize what you think. There's a discrepancy. We cannot easily bring the things together, but
Yeah.
Is it useful for you to see these examples and to hear a little bit about the difficulty of implementing your style of indicators?
Yeah, very helpful. I would still insist that it depends, of course, what quality of data you expect, but you can always implement surveys of users. Like, I don't know, with the cargo bikes, there must be some way to find out what would have been the mode otherwise for this kind of transport. For the commuting, there can be surveys done by, tracking the behaviors of the employees, how and if they have changed their way of commuting, and then estimates can be derived. It's always questionable if this would be representative of the exact kilometers actually, but it's always better to have an estimate than to have no data for modeling exercises. But yeah, it's very helpful to see what challenges arise in practice to track the success of it. I would also say that Brian definitely had a point in terms of tracking happiness, because you can track this by surveying public acceptance for a measure. And what we often saw in the past is that a measure might start off being not very well accepted, and then very often, just a short time later, it's much more widely accepted by the public, because, like Brian said, people don't like to change their behaviors, and imagining a change is always, just from a behavioral psychology perspective, it's
Yep.
very difficult. But then when people do it or are forced to do it, like through COVID, then they realize the benefits, and there are many studies showing that. For example, congestion charges that were 1 year later and suddenly 70% accepted, and it was 20% before. And yeah, so I think, to summarize, maybe as governments, local, municipal, national, whatever type of government, we have a responsibility to maybe, I don't know how to put it, do what will be turning out best for the people in the end, like kind of force and mandate changes at first, and then track if maybe the acceptance changes with time, because that's really often what happens.
Thank you. Yes, I think these are valuable comments, which already can be counted as your concluding remarks. But before we go to these, I just want to invite Simon to show a little bit the other practices that have been submitted during the break. Let's close the discussion on the KPIs. We have taken note of the comments, and we will try to arrange these in our written summary. Let's see. Maybe you can just run us through without everybody taking the floor to present them.
Of course. So yeah, well, first of all, if you didn't put your name onto these post-its, please, feel free to do that now, so that we know what has come from who. But okay, under reducing speed limits, we have a practice here from Brussels, which has reduced the speed limit in the city centre to 30 kilometers per hour, and also given priority to public transport. And indeed, it's closed many streets to cars. It's been a very noticeable change here. In terms of working from home, we have somebody submitted a practice that this has been accepted for civil servants in their city, with technical support provided if needed. car-free Sundays. Well, these two, I guess, are not specifically car-free Sundays, but more pedestrianization and reduction of car use. Katerina is squinting, which suggests I need to zoom in a bit. So here, expanding the pedestrian area in the city centres and expanding various areas of the city. And then also, well, a car-free avenue tradition in the city centre for summer. Again, it would be interesting to know who submitted this, so feel free to let us know in the chat. Or public transport, micro-mobility, walking and cycling. We had a practice here for a citywide bike sharing system as part of public transport. Brussels has installed biking lanes to facilitate bikes. This was again a big move during the COVID pandemic. Cargo bike subsidies. Well, Katerina can provide me with more information on that. Then we also had a practice on Green Friday initiatives with free public transport each Friday. So again, I'd be very interested in knowing which city or region this has come from. Well, this one here was not a practice, but a note that well, alternating private car access to cities could be resisted. It's a bit of a cultural shock or a return to less favorable times, if I can put it that way. A practice related to car sharing. So this can be well related to informing staff about the options for ride sharing so that they can organize this amongst themselves. And then we had, well, one person has submitted to say that their company has introduced a policy to prefer high-speed trains to planes wherever possible. So there we go. Thank you to everyone who submitted practice here.
Yes, that's great to see. Thank you for having tried with Miro. I had the impression of some were struggling, but this shows. And I can confirm, being from Brussels, all the Brussels examples have been introduced within the last, well, let's say since the COVID crisis emerged. So these are all new measures in terms of crisis response, perhaps more a response to COVID than a response to the energy crisis. But hey, who can take them both apart? So thank you for these illustrations. We have come to the end of our workshop, and I want to conclude it by giving everybody the possibility of our speakers to say a few words about your key takeaways. I would say, Leonie, you have already, so I would give the floor to the other five, and if there is any other final words that you want to say, Leonie, I will give you the last word. So let's take the others in terms of appearance, and let's start by Janusz.
Yes, I will take from here today two words. It's one is data, and data is a foundation of modeling to create some kind of policies and so on. I mean, we need to gather data and to do it in proper way. This is very important. Despite of that we don't see the value today, but usually the value will bring up, will pop up in next developments. This is one thing, and another thing is we need to be constant in our work, and as we see, many things take quite a long time, 7 years, 10 years, how many, and we need to believe in ourselves, and we see that very many good things are going on in different cities, and thanks to all these fans, and thanks to you sharing for all this, and I will cross my fingers to all cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Janusz. Yes, valid points. Elena.
Yeah, it was really interesting to find some new approaches that we didn't took into consideration when we made this huge plan in Iași. But yeah, I think it's important that we work more on changing behavior. And it was really an interesting presentation, and it's really a point that that I will try to promote more inside our organization. And I really enjoyed also the idea with the cargo bikes. We do have here all kind of services on bike. The civil society is very active here in Iași. They don't wait that the municipality comes with all the ideas. So they have some very nice initiatives like cycling to work or things like that. And also delivery of food, it's very, very popular to be done on bicycles, especially also because it's very cheap and it's very convenient for everyone. So yeah, I think there are new ideas that can be done, and I think this is somehow why I always take part in events like this, because it's really important to share when you have done something that you think it's good, but it's really more important to learn from the others, things that are easy to be implemented and very logical and very simple and with a high impact. So thank you very much to everyone for the inspiration.
Thank you. Nice takeaways and thanks. And I think the praise goes to the colleagues who presented. So, José Augusto, what is your take?
Yes, I'm actually very interested in this kind of events. Katerina and Simon has already been, you know, really great in coming up with these workshops and trying to empower technicians as well as decision makers in getting to know what other cities are doing in terms of sustainability, which is always very good. I enjoyed particularly the 10 points approach. I think it's a good blueprint to be used by cities, although I do think that each of these points that Leonie has come up has a striking set of challenges. I mean, when we're talking about mobility, we have to come up with two main cornerstones, which is the political commitment. If there isn't a political commitment, nothing is going to happen in our cities. So they have to come up with strategies, communication strategies to engage the private sector, the public sector, and every stakeholder involved in mobility. So I think that it's very important for them to be involved. And the other thing that it's important, in my opinion, is the funding. I mean, now since the European Green Deal has been introduced, there are lots of funding that are allocated for these matters, and I think it's up to each of the cities to come up with the calls that suits the best their own mobility challenges. So in our case, if it wasn't for the funding, we wouldn't be able to implement the measures that we have implemented. So I think that cities needs to be aware of what is happening in the new framework for Horizon or even at the Interreg, and try to see if it's feasible to apply for these applications or not. As for the key performance indicators, I think most of the right ingredients are there, but I think that it comes up to the scale and the type of action. We have to suit each of the key performance indicators to what is our target, what is our goal. So I think we're on the right track mostly, but I think there's still a lot of legwork to do in order to refine this matter a little more. But overall, I really enjoyed the event. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for your feedback. Let's hear from Asta.
Yeah, I want to thank you for this great workshop. And one thing that will stuck with me here is that we have to start to wake up to the possibilities. We have heard lots of measures today, how to create this new world and how to reduce the oil consumption. But it all comes down to the individual level. So we have to wake up from our habits and start making active decisions, how to travel. Yeah, that's about it. It's been very interesting to listen to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Asa. And last but not least, Brian.
Yeah, well, once again, just like to thank you for the invitation. And when you've been in this industry for 48 years, it's great to see that we can still work together. For every problem, there is a solution. If we can work together to help each other, that is the future. And if we do it like the Swedes over fika, coffee and cake, and we can solve the world's problems far quicker than sitting around the table talking about armies and wars. And you're so lucky having the European Union to pull this together. I remember what the world was like before it. And it's up to us to trust one another and work together. And it's events like this that actually show that we've all got problems. Some of us have got solutions that we didn't know about today from this event. And it's persuading the policymakers to listen to what we find out through working with our communities. You can't change the world on your own. And it's one world that belongs to us all. So we've all got to start working together to make that happen. And I just like to say, wish you all the best. And it's a great world if we can all work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Leonie, last takeaway.
Yes, with pleasure. I was taking notes all throughout because all your interventions were so interesting. So I'll try to keep it short. One thing I'd like to mention is that we have a bunch of more interventions modeled that were not popping up in the 10-point plan because this plan was really focused on immediate implementation. But if any of you is interested, there's also a measure on SUVs, for example, that I find very important on a local context in the World Energy Outlook, or frequent flyer levies and all kinds of things. But especially SUVs is very impactful and reshaping a city landscape. So I just want to raise the awareness of that. And also on the fact that the measures presented all need to go hand in hand. I think I want to stress that again in the end, because they do reinforce each other and depend on each other. Brian brought up this point on peak times, and I think that's very important. For example, public transport, an uptake of public transport only works, for example, if also employers provide flexibility in working hours, for example, or there are bike and walking lanes that make public transport less crowded. Car-free cities, on the other hand, only work if there is public transport available and so on. So they really depend on each other and need to be thought of in tandem. And lastly, I just want to thank you for the inspiration. I'm definitely going back to the IEA with a bunch of ideas of what to look at a bit more closely in our modeling. We have not thought about, for example, micromobility and cargo. So that's something we will look into. And it's very rewarding for me to speak here because we do this very detached from the reality, and it's really good to see that there are people like you out there that work really hard to make this happen. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, so we have come to our end. I think most of the things are said. Very important point by Leonie. The things go together. We have seen a bunch of measures and they have to be fitting with each other. So this is why our opening question was, one of our opening questions, do you have a sustainable urban mobility strategy or plan? And if you do have, well, these things are becoming outdated and they have to be updated on a regular basis. And I hope perhaps this workshop has given you some inspiration for adding new measures and integrating them in your midterm planning. And if that is the case, we would have already reached our goal. So it's up to us from the Policy Learning Platform in the name of Simon and Jenny to thank our speakers for the time that you've taken to prepare. to discuss and to share with us. Thank you very much. Our events live from you. And so I'm happy that you have all said that you've also received something in return. So that's already good. And for the rest of the audience, thank you for having stayed with us until the end. Please do take a minute to fill in the feedback survey that is popping out up as you close this webinar. And if there are any messages for us, anything that you would like to, leave us a message, we get back to you, and we arrange linking to good practices, to people, whatever we want, whatever you want. I'm sorry. The Policy Learning Platform is a flexible tool, and there are people behind, and we're here to serve you. So that's our reason for being. So please make use of it. With that, I wish you an excellent good afternoon, and keep saving fuel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Good afternoon. Bye.
All right.